the digital revolution as it is now, right? That's the first thing. And I guess social media. Those are two things. And it affects the economy, it affects our businesses in a way that I don't think any other development in the last 10, 20 years have. But the shift to digital and how you become smarter, I think, is something that the country has to really realize, right? And even the entrepreneurs. Second thing is social media, because social media, everybody's connected. There's no way escaping anybody else. And the ugly side to it is fake news. So it can affect, business, it can affect politics, it can affect social networks in a way that no other development has in the last few years. I think in terms of the outlook, we're still a little bit behind. And my metric for that, as I mentioned earlier, I sit on in the Endeavor Network. And so my base metric would be the startups, the tech startups, right? The digital savvy environment or community. Philippines is woefully still behind that of Indonesia. Amazing number of unicorns and number of ideas. Vietnam, even Thailand is showing. So I think and we have a lot of smart people. We're 107 million Filipinos and a lot of great software engineers. In the context of the digital disruption transformation, I guess the first thing is embrace it, right? And I've read a lot of your reports. It's inevitable, so you really just have to embrace it. And unfortunately, it's something that has to flow from the top leadership. You can't talk to the IT guy and say, "Hey, help me." It's a strategy that's driven from the top, from the boardroom, from the CEO. Or your CTO or chief innovation officer, that'll figure it out. So that embrace it. Don't be shy to say you don't understand it. Take it by the horns and really flow it down. And we've seen local companies begin to do that. We have a digital strategy or business for power, and we're seeing a couple that are taking a look into preventive maintenance. So there has to be a commitment to do this, digital or otherwise. Renewables actually is comprise about 29% of our installed capacity. I think we've exceeded the renewable energy goals of the government to triple, I think, by a certain year. So we're on track. But obviously, the advocates for renewable energy are not satisfied, and so we see still a lot of interest in renewables. Unfortunately, feed-in tariffs have been removed, except for for hydro until I think end of this year, right? So we have the renewable portfolio standards, which will replace the FIT allowance, the feed-in tariffs that will encourage more developers, but we're seeing not as much. There's not been very many developers raising their hands for wind. Solar a bit, yes. But I see that the trend to continue. Biomass a little tougher because, as you know, feedstock is always a tricky question. Choose your feedstock, because if the idea is to minimize or lower emissions, the feedstock gathering might actually cause more emissions than what you save if you were to generate from biomass. It's a tricky thing. Obviously, you want to have healthy reserves and prices that are affordable. There's a common misconception that the imperial law would make prices cheaper, go down. If you look at it, the Philippines actually, I guess it's no secret, they're one of the highest, if not the highest, within the region. But you have to know that a lot of these other countries, they will subsidize. So to us, it's still largely unsubsidized. And if, in fact, you look at our power bill, a lot of the prices, components are taxes. VAT, you have allowance for the lowest 4%, universal charge, etc. So a lot of add-ons. If you look at the generation charge, they've actually gone down. We need to have more affordable and stable. The price swings businesses, manufacturers can deal with. What they cannot deal with if there's a disruption to their manufacturing process, especially if you're doing semiconductor, which is our main export, product. And because we are an archipelago of 7,000 plus islands, it's a little tricky. Indonesia, with 17,000 islands, sort of has the same problem. Indonesia has a reserve margin 27.5%. But in West Java, which is about more than 50% of consumption, their reserve margin is 12%. So what does that tell you? It's not just generation, you need to strengthen your transmission. You have to do that, a more robust. People tend to focus on the generation, but they don't realize that the generators will locate in places where they can transmit the power. And oftentimes, those are congested. So if you cannot connect to the grid, you cannot build a power plant. You have to build a transmission line or a substation. So I guess really has to be a concerted view. It's not sexy. Energy as it is not really sexy. But unfortunately, if you want to grow it, then you need to have a safe reserve margin. So you don't have to worry about shortages every 2 or 3 years. Our strengths have been in our outsourcing workforce, and I think while a number of people, because of AI and all of this, they say it's sort of a sunset industry, I feel very strongly about it. To survive, it transforms into a knowledge process outsourcing, and we're seeing that. In fact, we have something in healthcare that we started in Bacolod, right? So I think that's still a viable business, and I think we have to really rethink how we reposition ourselves as machines get smarter, right? And still our typical, I'd have to say healthcare, there's a lot of opportunities. I think in fact, medical tourism to me, and Thailand really consciously said, we want to do this. We want to do this and we will do this. We have hospitals here that are already destinations for groups.